So let's start with the red pill. So there's actually a lot of things that I agree with this pill. The biggest thing being the whole waking up thing. Like, if it wasn't for this pill or whatever going mainstream, because it's pretty much mainstream these days, right? Like, any Gen Z guy knows Andrew Tate, knows Jordan Peterson. Even a lot of guys these days even know about things like hypergamy. These were things that were very under the radar 10 years ago. I wouldn't say it's common knowledge because the average day man still doesn't know it. But I would say quite a lot of, especially Gen Z men, do know about it. And the reason this was so good to understand, the reason it was so good to wake up is that you stop having this bullshit mindset and start viewing the world as it is. Another belief that this pill pushes is that men are disposable. If you've ever been a loser in your life, like in a loser position, so at the bottom of the social hierarchy, then this becomes so obvious to you as much as me telling you that grass is green. Because if you become a loser, no one cares. You're just gonna get replaced. Imagine you have the screwdriver, and I know it's weird to compare men to an object like the screwdriver, but just hear me out. Imagine you have a screwdriver and one day it stops working. You're not gonna have empathy for it, think, oh wow, I've used the screwdriver for years and I've done this with it and I've done... No, you're just gonna throw it away, get a new one, boom, just like that, easy. No feelings, nothing. This is the same way men are treated in society. If you're useless, so if you don't bring anything to the table, whether that be money, looks, anything, right? Like, you just have to bring something to the table. This is also something a lot of people from the black belt don't understand. Even Chad has to bring something to the table, which is his looks. As soon as his looks would deteriorate, as soon as he would get fat, for example, his girl would leave him instantly. And this is honestly the biggest thing that helped me, like, wake up and just become a better man in general. Another thing I really like about this belief is the whole self-improvement thing it has going on, where you basically say, men can upgrade themselves. It was a very interesting thing because as someone who grew up with video games, in video games you typically start as a level 1 dude, and then by the end of the game, you have your min-maxed build, you can slay dragons, do all that stuff. In real life, that often wasn't the case. I remember when I was about 17 or 18 and I still couldn't cook, and my parents just told me that, like, I can't cook because I didn't do it when I was young. And that's such a common belief, by the way. Like, if you ask the average man this, they'll say, like, oh yeah, little Timmy, he rode on bikes when he was young. That's why he rides bikes nowadays when he's an adult. People have this belief that if you don't do something when you're very young, that all of a sudden you're like locked out of the skill. You just can't unlock it anymore, which is very weird because I literally learned how to cook when I was 18, 19, just by looking up YouTube videos because it's not that hard, bro. It's very basic. You can look up, there's tons of videos online about it. It really isn't that hard. But the common belief in this world is that if you don't know something, then you can't learn it, if that makes sense. It's such a weird belief. Now, speaking of leveling up, there's also a big downside to self-improvement, and that's mainly in the fact that a lot of YouTubers, they wanted to get more views, and so how do you get more views? Well, at the end of the day, men just want to get girls. Men just want to get bitches. So they linked self-improvement with getting women. They said that, if you get better at these skills, if you become more present, then you'll get more girls. This is just delusion. This is this whole mindset that the spell believes that anyone can go from a 1 to a 10. No, you can't. You can realistically only go up by 1 point or maybe by 2 points if you also do surgery and all that stuff. But other than that, I would say self-improvement is mostly just made for yourself. It's mostly made to get better at certain skills, to get a better job, to, do all this stuff outside of girls. Because a lot of things that has to do with girls are mostly out of your control. What I mean is, girls are mostly looks, which is something we'll talk about later in this video. But for now, yeah, this whole idea that if you meditate and you're more present, then you'll get more girls. They don't care, bro. Like, they literally don't give a shit. Now that I'm slowly starting to get my looks back, because my hair is regrowing, because I got a hair transplant. Bro, literally, like, yesterday, there was this girl across the hallway, and I didn't even pay attention to her. I had my AirPods in my ear. I was a proper zombie, listening to music. She tugged at my coat just to say hello. Now, I'm not going to sit here and cope, oh wow, that means she's into me, or I'm into her, or whatever. I'm not saying any of that. But the fact of the matter is that it doesn't really matter how present you are. It doesn't really matter if you're grinding. Girls don't care about any of that. All they care about is, does this guy look good? After that, yeah, maybe these things can matter. But if you don't look good, nobody cares, especially girls. They don't care about, like, self-improvement, that anyone can go from a 1 to a 10. No, you can't. If you're a 4, you're going to get to a 6. If you're a 5, you can potentially get to a 7. Stuff like that. But if you're a 1, you'll stay a 1. Like, and even if you go from a 1 to a 3, everything below a 5 just gets zero attention anyway these days. Now, another thing that's very delusional about this community, about this pill, is the men peak later part. And what's actually crazy is that YouTubers didn't push this idea. So a lot of YouTubers obviously push certain ideas just to make more money. Like the one that anyone can go from 1 to a 10 because that motivates desperate, ugly guys. This idea started all the way back when Rollo Tomasi wrote The Rational Male. And I remember reading it, and there's this certain graph in it that, shows that women basically peak earlier than men, which that is technically true. A woman peaks in her 20s. I know a lot of like bitter old women get mad at this, but you really do peak in your 20s because your youth is valued the most. Whereas men peak later, this graph says they peak in their 30s to 40s, and this is because men typically, in their 30s and 40s, typically when men attain wealth, when they have status, when they have their own house, car, all that type of stuff. There's only one very big issue with this graph or with this idea, is that after 25, you start deteriorating very slowly. Now, you can slow down the age pill, right? You can do skincare routines, you can eat healthy, you can work out, you can all that stuff, but you're still going to get older. And if you just go outside, bro, like the average 30 to 40-year-old man, he's not going to attract a 20-year-old girl. You know who 20-year-old girls like the most? 20-year-old pretty boys. It's not that complicated. People are more into their own age group. And again, sure, there's guys who can break this barrier. For example, Leonardo DiCaprio is a very famous example. He's literally dating like 19-year-old models while he's 40, 50. But you're not Leonardo DiCaprio. You're not a millionaire. You're not in Hollywood. You're Joe Schmo who has an average 9-to-5 job, average house, average everything. You're not going to make the cut. Like, you need to do something very extreme to basically do this. You need to be very over the top, where a girl is willing to date, someone who's literally 10 years older than her. Because a lot of Gen Z people, my generation, these are the girls that are right now in their 20s. A lot of them think it's creepy to date like an old guy and all this stuff. And the only way they're going to break that rule is if the old guy is either a Chad or he's just, very rich and all that stuff. But yeah, for the average man, you're not going to peak later, bro. Like, your peak is 20 till 25. I would say that's your peak, also like biologically speaking. And that's it. After that, you're just going to deteriorate very slowly. And eventually the wall is going to hit you. Now, the wall is a little bit later for men than it is for women, but it's still going to hit you regardless. So, yeah, this is just delusional. However, having said all of that, the waking up part is so essential, is so good about this spell, that I'm still willing to put it in A tier, even though there's a lot of delusional stuff going on. Now, what better way to introduce the black pill than to start with a dose of statistics? So it said that 30% of men are a virgin this day. However, when you go outside, you'll see that it's far more men who are down bad. Yeah, 30% are virgins. Fine, that's cool. But there's a big percentage, mostly normies, who are just very down bad, who are willing to do all this stuff just to get a woman. And so when you look at this other statistic, which shows people who've had at least 2 partners in the last year, like 30% of men are virgin, and then even a bigger percentage of that men, so around 80% of men, get at least 2 partners in the last year. Now, I know what you're going to say, oh, but what's wrong with that? That's okay. Well, if you look at the next graph, nothing changed for women. If you look at it, like literally in between 1992 and 2015, nothing has changed. I know COVID happened, I know like Tinder and all this stuff happened, but nothing really changed, They're still as promiscuous, they can still do whatever they want. Whereas for men, all these things severely damaged us. And this is not just for the 30% virgins, this is for the normies. Because I know, man, like when I see them walking outside and the way like their wife has to speak up and she's more like dominant in the relationship, I know who's wearing the pants, alright? I know that's a dead bedroom. I can see it. I know so other people are like depressed and they see a couple and think, oh wow, I wish I had that. Not me. Most of these couples that you see, bro, they have this very like mommy and son type of dynamic, which is just, it's just weird. But yeah, if you couldn't tell already, the black pill is just mostly genetic determinism that looks matter more than anything, your genes matter more than anything. You gotta basically deal with the cards you were dealt with. I guess that's the best way of describing this pill. This pill in itself brings in a lot of good things, but also a lot of bad things. The good things are mostly the statistical part. I like that part way more because there's more evidence to it. You know, one thing I absolutely hate about the red pill is when guys bring up their anecdotal stories of like, oh, I saw this short guy and he's bagging this woman, and it's like, okay, fine, but 50 or 60% of other short guys aren't doing that. My point is, this pill doesn't dismiss the lower half. This is called survivorship bias, where you only hear about the short guys who did, end up having a wife and children. Or you'll hear about the bald guy who did end up, looking good and blah, blah, blah. But this pill acknowledges that, okay, there's going to be one fat guy who has a girl and everything. There's going to be one ugly dude who has it. But for every one of those, there's going to be 19 others who don't. It's important to acknowledge that fact because then you'll not blame yourself as much. If you're like an ugly guy or if you're a bald guy or short, whatever it is guy, and you're just struggling, you're not going to blame yourself as much. Because really, bro, like this whole survivorship bias, like pointing to the small guy who does have it, it's kind of gaslighting. This is like those self-improvement YouTubers who got big through self-improvement back when it was like booming. And they're telling their fans, oh, you should also start a self-improvement channel because it works. You see, I became a millionaire. And that means you too can become a millionaire. Not really. Self-improvement in this day after like Andrew Tate, Jordan Peterson, all that stuff, it's so oversaturated. It's not worth it. Like, it's better to find a new niche. And this is the same way. This is survivorship bias. And yeah, this pill goes completely against that, which I like a lot about it. Another thing I like about it is the whole looks maxing thing. Because if you actually want to get women, looks maxing has a far bigger ROI, return on investment, than self-improvement. If you just want to get girls, right? If you don't care about like getting a better career, having better grades, being present, making money, if you don't care about any of that, looks maxing is far better because yeah, self-improvement has going to the gym and so is looks maxing, but there's actually a lot of these small autistic details which looks maxing definitely helps you a lot in, such as skincare. I know if you're in the scene, you would think, oh, skincare is mainstream. Not really, bro. Go outside. The average guy has very bad skin, very dry skin. Almost zero men have that glass type of skin, which I've talked about already in the past. The last thing I like about this pill is that it removes unnecessary self-blame when there's external factors at play. What I mean with this is, for example, if you were too short to get into the NBA, you're not going to sit there and cry because you realize, all right, I wasn't born tall enough. And that's it, because you accept your fate. Which to normies, that sounds very depressing, but really it's more fulfilling to accept where you're standing because that means that you worry less and you can actually invest energy into things that, are still more under your control. The best example of this is Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan once said that he couldn't beat his brother Larry Jordan on a one-on-one. Larry Jordan would literally beat him 99% of the time in a one-on-one. So with this knowledge, why is Larry Jordan not in the NBA? Why does no one even know who he is? When I say Michael Jordan, everyone knows who he is. When I say Larry Jordan, what? Now why is that, you might ask? Well, that's because Larry Jordan was 5'8", 5'7", and Michael Jordan is 6'4". That's literally the only reason why you and I know Michael Jordan and you and I don't know who Larry Jordan is. It's because of this height difference. And it doesn't matter how much Larry Jordan cries that he wants to be an NBA player and he wants to be a legend. It doesn't matter. You're 5'8". You're never going to get into the NBA, or you're just never going to be as good, right? Especially with all the other tall guys around you. And that's what I mean. One very good thing about this pill is that you know your place. You know where you're standing. So you're not gonna be depressed thinking about if I just work hard enough. No, you're too short. That's it. Stop. Look for something else to do. Now, something I find very bad about this pill is the whole Chad montages. Now, if you don't know what a Chad montage is, then you probably don't have brain rot like I do. But it's this whole idea that guys are editing these videos of like this male model in this very weird way. Like, I'll just play B-roll so you can see what I'm talking about. But it's gay, bro. Like, it's just weird. This part of the pill always just weirded me out. It reminded me of like those K-pop girls, who are like crazy fans of them. And they always also make these montages. It's very similar to that. And I don't know, man. It's like you're over here crying that girls are praising Chad, but are you really different? Like, you're no different. You're making montages out of Chad, hours of editing and all this stuff. And these videos are getting hundreds of thousands of views, millions of views. It's not just, some small niche. Like, there's a lot of these dudes who are literally worshipping Chad, and it's just weird to me. Which gets me to my second point, which I don't like about this pill, is that you can't accept Chad for who he is. And what I mean with this is, that Chad doesn't have to play by the rules, that he can break the rules, that he can literally be a criminal and still end up a millionaire, that he can be brain dead, but because he looks good, some model agency picks him up and now he's a millionaire. That's how easy life is for Chad. Like, some of you just can't accept this, and the fact that you're crying in the comments every single time about this fact, which I just don't get it. Like, at first, when I discovered this, it was also crazy to me, especially like the Jeremy Meeks pill. That's one of the craziest parts about like this entire pill, is once you realize Jeremy Meeks, who he is, his backstory. It just blows your mind, right? But once you realize, okay, this dude is a criminal and now he's a millionaire because he looks good. It's like, all right, that happened. So Chads have easier lives. It's like me telling you that grass is green. But after a while, after the 10th time I told you grass is green, you're gonna be like, cool, alright, and then you just move on. But a lot of people in this community, man, it's like anytime they see Chad breaking the rules, they freak the fuck out. They're crying again in the comments. And it's just weird to me, because to me, I've accepted it. I get it, bro. Chad doesn't have to do anything. I sometimes get those comments too. Oh, you're coping, bro. Chad doesn't have to do this. No, bro, you're the one who's coping, because you're still crying that Chad doesn't have to do anything. I get that. I'm not Chad. You're not Chad either. We have to play by the rules. We have to do all these things like skincare. I know Chad doesn't have to do skincare to get girls, but guess what? You're not Chad. I'm not Chad. So we have to do every little thing that makes your SMV just a little bit higher, just to get a girl, just like going to the gym, just like doing all these other things. But there's plenty of these guys, bro. They're saying constantly like, oh, but Chad doesn't have to do this, and it's like, you sound like this little fucking child. You remember like back in elementary, anytime something happens, a child always points the finger at someone else. Oh, but he's doing it, and it's just so petty, because it's like you claim that you acknowledge reality for what it is, yet you're crying that Chad can break the rules. If you're actually, if you can see reality for what it is, then you would also accept this fact. You would accept that Chad can break the rules. That's it. Boom. Done. Like, is it just me, or is this just plain... I don't know if I'm coping or whatever, but to me, this entire Chad praising Chad montage is like... basically everything surrounding Chad in this pill is just complete brain rot to me. Like, I'm not denying that he has 20 girls in his DMs. I'm not denying that he gets 100 matches when he goes on Tinder. I'm not denying any of that. All I'm saying is, I get it. He's God. He can do whatever he wants to. But am I gonna cry about that for the rest of my life? No. Like, I get it. The guy is far above me and the advantages that he has in society, but... that's it. Now I still need to move on, I still need to go on with my life. I can't just sit here and cry about it 24/7. So having said all of that, I'm also going to put this in the A tier category. I know it sounded very negative, especially in the latter part of this pill, but that's mostly a small part of it, I would say. A bigger part of this pill is the whole statistical evidence, is the whole, especially looks maxing, because that just blew up. That became very mainstream. The fact that this pill has looks maxing easily means it's going to be A tier at the very least. All right, next is the blue pill. And the weird thing about this pill is that people who are blue pilled don't know that they're blue pilled, if that makes sense. Because this is very much the standard way of thinking. This is thinking that, eventually you're going to get the girl. Eventually, when you get a good job, she's going to come back to you. That personality matters. This whole brainwashing shit, right? I talked about this in another video that Disney movies basically ruined an entire generation of men. That's basically what I'm talking about when it comes to the blue pill. Honestly, this is just bad. Like, I literally see zero advantages to this. Like, maybe, I could say, oh, if you're born good looking, then being blue pilled is good, but not really. One of the best things, imagine if you're a Chad, right? If you're very good looking. If you know how much power good looks give you, then you can abuse that. Whereas if you're like very naive and you're good looking, but you don't know like how much you can pull, I feel like that's more of a weakness, and eventually that's going to get abused by someone else. So yeah, I'm just going to put this in D tier. I see zero advantages to this, This whole idea of, oh, you have to be a nice guy, you have to do this, like, I don't know, I just don't see any of it. I mean, maybe because I'm too jaded, that could definitely be a part of it. But yeah, I just see zero advantages to being blue-pilled. But again, you don't know you're blue-pilled until you find out about this whole side of the internet. So yeah, it's a D tier. Like, yeah, I literally can't think of a scenario where being naive is better. All right, next is the white pill, and this is accepting things as they are. Basically just means optimistic nihilism. If the black pill is more nihilism in general, then the white pill is more the optimistic version of it, and this is currently where I'm standing. And this is where you don't really hate people for their nature. For example, a lot of this community, I see this in the comments so much, they talk a lot of shit about women, this and that, and I just don't get it, because to me it's like, it's part of them, the whole like hypergamy and all this stuff, it's just part of nature. The only reason you're mad is because Disney or whoever, like social media, gave you this idea that your personality matters. They implemented that thought into your brain, and now you're mad at women, when really you should be mad at these billion-dollar companies. They're the ones who brainwashed you. Like, think about it. If you never got this idea from these movies, these games, the social media, from whatever, I don't think you would think that. I don't think most people would actually believe that personality matters. I feel like that's a big lie told in our current generation, and, the millennials too, and the Gen X, because we are generations raised on entertainment. We are generations raised on, sitting in front of a television or playing video games. And because you're raised behind the screen, you're basically raised behind propaganda. You're raised behind this idea that you can win her over when you can't. I don't blame women for that. That idea came from the movies, came from the companies, not from them. And that's why I don't hate on it, I don't hate on this fact that they all want Chad, because that's just how nature is. If you look at any other animal group, such as lions, wolves, whatever it is, it's the same thing. The alpha wolf gets all the bitches. The same thing goes for the lions, for the bears, for whatever animal group you pick. The big dude always gets the women, the females. It's just that you forgot that humans are also very animalistic. I think that's also a very big issue with this. A lot of people view humans as this, oh, we're so much more superior. And yeah, I get it. Obviously we are superior in the fact that you can think for yourself, you can invent stuff, your neocortex is developed. That's one of the main advantages humans have over other animals. When it comes to primal desires, hunger, lust, who you're attracted to, these are very primal desires, and you're still an animal. You can't control who you're attracted to. It's mostly you see that guy, or for us guys, you see that cute girl and you like her. There doesn't have to be a reason why you just like her, and that's like the animalistic part of our brain. And that's fine, that's okay. Women have the same thing, and that's why I don't blame them. Like, it's just whatever. I just accept reality for what it is. And because this takes the best parts of like the other pills, I'm gonna put this in S tier. Now I'm probably biased because this is where I'm currently standing. But yeah, I really do feel like if you just put that energy, that hate that you have for this certain group of people into more useful stuff, then you're gonna get more out of life, you know? Alright, finally there's the race pill. Now this is technically a part of these other pills, but I had to make this a separate topic, and that's because no one talks about this in this space. But I will. So this pill basically says that your race will dictate most of your life, you know, your social life, where you're gonna end up working, all that stuff, the way you're gonna end up looking. Now, there's different components of the race pill. There's this one book I read like a while ago called The Bell Curve. And this is a very controversial book because the conclusion of the author was that Asian people and white people on average have higher IQs on average than other races. There's also these studies that show that white men in general are more desirable, especially in globalized cities. That's where white men really peak. That's where they really stand out. But as a brown dude, I'm gonna be honest, the race pill, it's pretty hard to discuss because it depends on where you live. You know, that's where I feel like the race pill gets you the hardest. So if you're a minority, and when I mean a minority, I mean literally like in the neighborhood that you live. So there's 99 white guys and girls, and you're the one brown dude. That's basically how I grew up. I was the token, I was the one brown dude. And this is where the race pill gets really brutal because I genuinely thought I was ugly because of this. Like, I look back at some of my pictures in high school and, you know, I didn't look good, but I was definitely a normie, maybe even above a normie because I was always the tallest guy in my class, you know. I always had the deepest voice. I just went through puberty quicker than other people. I still felt very ugly, and that's because when there's 99 white people and you're the only brown guy, no one really wants to associate with you like romantically because then other people perceive them as less too. Does that make sense? When you live in this very small town like I do, the only people who are dating are, you know, white and white. Like that's it. That's the only combination you're gonna see. And so naturally, you're not gonna want to be the weird one. You're not gonna be the one who wants to date the brown dude, especially with girls, because girls, just generally speaking, don't like to take risks. And this is very much a risky play, you know. If they end up dating a brown dude, the other white girls are gonna talk shit behind them. They might get casted out of their little friend group. So yeah, if you live in a very small town, the race pill is very much true, and I would put it in the S tier category. It's very brutal, it's very much true. However, if you're living in a city, because right now I'm going to college, to university, which is in a city, yeah, I don't notice it, like, at all. You know, I've talked about this in the past. I've attracted quite a lot of girls, and yeah, it's far less, you know. And a bunch of these girls, by the way, were white, or however you want to say it, like they were European, Caucasian. I don't know how you want to say it, but you get my point. Yeah, in a city, I would put this more in the B tier category. You know, it's definitely still gonna affect you in the way you look. Your race heavily determines how you're gonna end up looking. I'm gonna put this in the B tier. And one last thing I want to say about this whole race thing is to deny that each race has unique strengths and weaknesses is just stupid. It's something that I noticed in like the real world. I don't know if you notice this pattern or this is just some crazy theory of mine, but everything is becoming globalized in the sense of, you know, we all speak English now. I'm a Dutch, Afghan, whatever guy, and I can speak pretty fluent English. We watch the same shows, we consume the same media, we're both on Instagram, we're both on YouTube. So everything is like more, you know, turning into the same. And I feel like this whole idea that races don't have their own strengths and weaknesses is also this bullshit idea that comes from the same source, if that makes sense, from the same base, from the same foundation. Because where did you think this idea came from in fantasy that we have elves, orcs, humans, and they all have their different traits, they all have their different strengths and weaknesses? Where did you think this idea come from? Because, spoiler alert, writers don't invent stuff. They just take stuff from real life, then they apply it in fiction, and they, you know, they over-exaggerate it, obviously, right? But we still have those things, and so I don't know, I just think it's stupid. Like, this whole idea that race doesn't matter, it's kind of bullshit. Like, if race doesn't matter, then why do white girls always shame Asian guys for having a small dick? You know what I mean? Like, that's part of your class, if you think about it. Why is there this idea that every black dude has a BBC? Why is that? Because inherently, we all think that certain races have certain strengths. But then again, it's complicated and it's hard to, like, come to a single conclusion. But yeah, for now, let's keep it at beat there. And yeah, that's pretty much the video. If you enjoyed it, make sure to give it a like and comment. And yeah, that's the video.